All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion.
Here comes the intro. Skip forward 30 seconds if you want to get right to the episode. This is the Tailboard Talk podcast, the best health, wellness, and lifestyle resource for the fire service. We're using stories, lessons, and tips from the front lines to give a realistic view of what the job can do to us and how we can make it out alive. I'm Chris Morella, a firefighter since 03, medic since 05, full-time since 08, and promoted to lieutenant in 20. I'm also a personal trainer and strength coach, and I'm here to give you the best information and host the best discussions to make us capable and durable, both on the job and away from it. So grab a heater, steal some fancy creamer from First Shift, and let's go chat. Let's get into it. Introduce yourself as much as you want to share, and we'll kind of jump off from there because we have a preset topic, but we're going to go all over the place, I think. I'm pretty sure. So go for it.
All right. So, hi, I am Taylor Goodman. I am a wellness and fitness coordinator for a large fire department in Northern Virginia. Anytime I've gotten interviewed for a job, they always ask you what your strengths and weaknesses are. And my strength is people. So you'll notice today as I talk and share things, I'm not going to be the smartest person or have the best research, referrals or anything like that. But I am good at building relationships. And I think that's hugely important for what we do. So though I came from military before fire, building relationships with athletes in collegiate, with athletes to a degree in the military, and this now is why I do what I do, is getting to those people and what drives them.
I feel like, I don't know why it just clicked in my head, but wasn't one of the first Instagram conversations we had about that, where I was like, who cares about, I think it was a technical thing, like squats or sit-ups or deadlifts or something like that. I'm like, who cares? You're driving people away because you're telling them what not to do or how to do something wrong, or the message is totally lost. And you're like, can't we just deal with people and have good relationships and make them work hard? And that should solve most of our problems. No, apparently not. You have to have a study for everything, and everything has to be backed by an irrefutable science, and you can't just work hard and have a good time anymore. So,
yeah. And I think science is great and it absolutely has a place, right? But if you can't explain that science on a 5th grade level, are you really doing your job? So I will leave that there.
And then I thought of one of the first things we suggested maybe 3 or 4 years ago when we were trying to schedule this thing was Taylor's tantrums or Taylor's tangents or something like that, because a lot of things pop up with the community that we work with. And I can't remember the specific one at the time, but what's going on right now in your largest department in Northern Virginia? Is there anything coming up right now that you're weekly tackling this problem, or is a stick or thorn in your side right now that you're this is coming up again? I got to keep having this conversation, and it's just going to, you're going to have it forever. But every time it comes up, you're man, tired of this one.
So I'll start with my little disclaimer that, these opinions are of my own and not my department's, and just things that I see from experience. So right now we recently got collective bargaining, right? And I swear everything we've wanted to get done in the last year comes down to, well, it's stuck in collective bargaining. It's stuck in collective bargaining. And though I don't fully understand what that means, I do know that our union voted for it. And so, progress in the fire service is already slow, but we've basically been at a standstill from that. So that's definitely challenging, especially as we're trying to get, productive initiatives like a, temporary restricted duty program moving forward. So that way everyone so you might call it light duty, I guess, where you are. I think it just depends. But that way everyone who comes, off of their FMLA, their short-term disability, and comes back to work, they all get treated the same. And, because I care about people and I've watched some get burned, I'm we all came together as a health and safety committee, more or less. And we're hey, let's create a policy So that way there is a specific step of like, all right, you come back to work, you go see Taylor, then
Mm-hmm.
you see the behavioral health coordinator. Whether you need anything or not from us, hey, do you need any resources? You have anything going on you want to talk about? Yes, no, move on to the next step. But at least every person will be getting treated the same. So, you know, though collective bargaining hopefully will ultimately be good, we are definitely like stuck at a standstill as far as like trying to get like bigger policies and things across right now.
That's just another area where relationships mean so much. I mean, if
Mhm.
you've listened to any of the Joe Galley episodes, we went through a period when I was on probation, like 15 years ago, where it was so contentious between the union and the city that the first card played was, okay, it's time to negotiate. Like negotiations are coming up in 3 months for our contract. And we just knew that it was going to be ignored. The deadline would pass, the second deadline would pass, and we'd file for arbitration. Like that was just the way it went. And then we'd be in arbitration for up to 2 years. And then we would eventually settle and then get a contract. So I think in my first 10 to 12 years, I was only under contract as a full-time employee for maybe 4, because the other remainder of those years we were in arbitration, we were in litigation. It was just completely, it was terrible. It was absolute junk.
That sounds
Now
wild.
we have a totally different cast of players on both sides, and stuff moves so much more quickly and so much more smoothly because, from my perspective, people have a clear defined role of what their expectations are. No one's overstepping. No one's trying to impose these crazy things on each other. The union's not trying to like get away with anything, and the city's not trying to hammer us. And so everybody's like, yeah, if that's good for you guys and it doesn't step on our toes, then go do it. And the city does the same thing, and the union it's much better now. But
Yeah.
one bad apple, one bad player in that whole thing can like lock it up completely.
I think
And
like the first 6 months was just like, hey, what is collective bargaining? How does that even look? And everyone on both sides are trying to figure it out. So uh,
yeah,
I've been, told and hope that at the end of the year we'll start getting some things sorted. But
yeah,
yeah, just like that's the pain in my side right now, and there's nothing I can do about it, right? Like I
yeah.
can't control it, so it's just kind of like, all right, let's move on to what we can control and just focus on the day to day.
Yeah. And also, it should be overall, in the grand scheme of things, it should be a positive. And
Right.
so at least you know that, yeah, it's going to be stuck in the mud here for a year or two. But after that, if we set the ground rules and everybody feels comfortable, we should be rocking and rolling. And then overall, yeah, it should be a good benefit to the department. So why don't you run through your role, kind of your responsibilities and your scope at your department?
Yeah, so fun fact, my official title is Wellness Center Manager, which cracks me up
Hey,
because it sounds
it's the
like I
YMCA.
like run a Gold's Gym and just like
It does.
we call it, my captain and I jokingly call ourselves like gym teacher and gym teacher intern because
Yeah.
we do occasionally fold towels. And of course, as you know, firefighters, they'll see us and be like, oh, is that all you guys do over here is fold towels? And we'll just be like, yep, it's all we do all day, just folding the
Hmm.
towels. Um, so we have about a 10-15,000 square foot facility, and I call myself a wellness and fitness coordinator because that is truly what I do. My primary responsibilities are programming and facilitating recruit school PT with our team of about 35 tactical strength conditioning facilitators. So we moved away from the previous ACE, no longer accredited cert, that is now called Fit to Thrive. Um, so we do that in the mornings, right? That's going to be our primary. I also serve as our CPAT coordinator. So we just switched to doing year-round CPAT. So 6 out of the 12 months a year, we're running CPAT in our
Nice.
facility. And my responsibility there is making all the sign-up sheets and checking schedules and making sure we have the appropriate personnel to help with orientation, mentoring, and stuff like that. And I do actually show up for some of those sessions because, things like practice runs and such, you should have a coordinator present. I also help with our like kind of informal TRD process. So all people who end up coming back onto light duty with whatever their assignment is do get an email that are like, hey, if you haven't checked in with Taylor, please do. If you're in need of like a program, some mobility, whatever your needs are. So we do have that as well. And then of course we manage, the team of 35 TSAC personnel. And a lot of that for me is like monthly or weekly emails to them, letting them know about CEU opportunities and all of that good stuff. So those are my like primary responsibilities day to day, and then the other 8 hours of my day is admin work.
Oh yeah, the other 8 hours, 8 to 16 hours, depending. Um, Tell me about the facility, because I think that's a pretty rare thing, and it's something that I have dreams of in the city I work for, because we have a lot of older buildings downtown, kind of centrally located. I don't think it'll ever happen, because we also have a actual community center in the middle of town where it's like the city owned YMCA kind of thing. So they give us a membership to there if we want it. I don't think we could ever get one designated specifically to us, but give me like the rundown of that thing, because it sounds amazing and something that everyone would want, and you have it.
Yeah,
So
I would
give me.
I would love to take credit for it. But it was there when I started working there. So I'm the first person to ever hold my position, and my captain had been working on it for 10 years before I had gotten there. So,
Wow.
Just someone with persistence, which you need in the fire service, and I think a lot of people will like have an idea, So anyway, like my captain, this was like when he first went to the office after getting a surgery, a long time ago, they started trying to figure out like what a program would look like. So 9 years later, I get hired on, and the facility
Wow.
had been built. The facility, so like I said, so how we got justification for it, to my understanding, is because we wanted to transition from our county run like PAT test, which was just like, a version of CPAT, we'll say, to actually being able to do CPAT. So we were kind of on par with like what's going on nationally, hopefully boost our, recruitment numbers, so people didn't have to come to where we are for, 4 different sessions, right? So that is a huge portion of the facility. We have like a big bay area where CPAT is, but we also have like a 40-yard turf out there with a little CrossFit setup gym. We have some like endless stairs, right? Just like a staircase that goes to nowhere. And just some like accessory things people have brought in. And then we have our main gym space, which was built out by Sornex, where we have essentially like 3 racks where there's like 3 different places to really work on each of those. And they're all connected with like pull-up bars and storage and stuff like that. And then upstairs we have a yoga area or a recovery area where it's just, smooth, more like smooth tile. There's smart TV. People can pull a divider over if they want to just like have some peace and quiet while they foam roll. We recently got 2 massage chairs, which has been like a big thing. So we've got 2 massage chairs that do like compression, massage, and heat. And like those have been a big hit. And just like, again, myself, my captain, were big like people. So like, hey, if this is something that gets someone to come to the gym, like that's a win, right? Like even if it's just for recovery. And then the other side of that upstairs space is where we have all of our like conditioning equipment. So true forms and rowers and ellipticals, to my dismay, and things like that. So downstairs is where myself, my captain, and our behavioral health coordinator's office is. And that was intentional that, that position, especially the behavioral health coordinator position, was not at the main building, or anywhere where people wouldn't feel comfortable. So my captain, really like is the driver for a lot of why the program is the way that it is. And people be like, oh my gosh, your facility's so nice, you're so lucky. And I was like, yeah. And I had nothing to do with
It sure is. I'm in line with you with getting people in the door. This is a conversation I have with some members of staff frequently, because we have relatively small workout rooms in each station, but we've outfitted them pretty much all identically. As we've built new stations, they've gotten bigger and room for more stuff, but we try to keep everything the same. And then when something comes up, we try to add it in. So recently we got the sleds with wheels on them, the tank sleds or whatever, right?
We've got one.
And so we got 3 of them, because I could justify that through our consumption course, because I run a consumption course that's 3 individual courses. They're all the same. We track the time, the number of rounds, the individual events completed. Everybody can start at the same time, then it goes off individually. Then we run them past the bells and take that time. So it's very standardized and very measurable. But I can only get 3 of these sleds because they're like $1,000 each. So I said, well, I need 3, 1 for each person on the consumption course. Then next year we'll get the next 4 or 5. But the conversation came up like, how much more stuff are we going to keep putting in these rooms? Like, isn't that enough stuff for the guys? Don't they have enough squat bars and landmines, and we've got the nice racks like you guys. And if people aren't going to use it, they're not going to use it. Why do we keep putting more stuff in? And I said, no, we buy the expensive stuff and the good stuff because it's not for the 80% that's not going to go in there. It's for the 20% who are going to use it. And if they go in there, I want them to have the best experience possible. So that way we're rewarding those people that are doing it anyways, and they get a good experience. And if one of those bottom people decides to come in and try it for a day, I want them to have an even better experience with the best equipment possible, because maybe that'll make them want to come in next day. Or if we buy just Craigslist stuff or Facebook Marketplace stuff and jam it in there with no reason, and somebody wants to try it out for the first time in 15 years and they go in there and it's a mess and the stuff's falling apart and it's all secondhand and it's all junk, they're not coming back in that room ever again. So I'm with you. I'm like, let's do the things that are going to get people in, and then we'll hook them, and then hopefully we have them. But
Yeah.
don't shortchange yourself on the front end by being stingy or afraid to invest a little bit in a potential future.
I mean, so we have to do like an orientation with anyone who wants access to the facility. And I can tell you, like, we started doing yoga maybe my second year there, and then like these massage chairs, and like people being like, hey, I don't have access to the facility. Like their first time in the facility was doing something, you know, like yoga or the massage chair, which also are totally acceptable because it's not just career people who can go in there. It's volunteers, right? Who might be admin members, or they could be operational, or it could be the admin members across the street at our, you know, at our admin building. So it's just like, we don't just serve, you know, yeah, we primarily serve career firefighters, but we have like a big group of us, you know, 1,500 total. And it's like, I'm not the wellness and fitness coordinator for career firefighters, right? I'm the wellness and fitness coordinator for the county fire department, which means admin, career volunteer, regardless.
And there's got to be a lot of, I would assume that the volunteer side of it's probably the harder ones to keep tabs on. You almost want them in there more because they work less frequently. There's not as much oversight maybe to them. When I worked in my part-time department before I got hired full-time, I mean, it was very much like, yeah, he's the mechanic that works down the street and he's on shift tonight for 12 and he hasn't worked here in 3.5 weeks because he's been too busy with his family.
Yeah.
So you almost want those people more to get in there on a regular basis. So
yeah,
they're better prepared for the random shift.
I don't know how it is where you are from, but here, you know, 85% of our career folks don't even live in the county. So most of the people who use the facility are volunteers, and they come in, you know, really anytime, but like afternoon, evenings, and then on the weekends. And that kind of plays out with how we like I always offer a yoga session at night during the month, and like we always have an orientation on the weekend during the month. Like I know like Vanessa had like one of her questions is like, you know, how is it different, or like what do you have to change? And it's just like, at the simplest piece of that is like, we just need to make sure that as we're offering stuff, we're considering that they're on different schedules than we are. And we're not going to be able to do all of it, right? Like we have squat workshops that we run at 7 a.m. in the morning that one of my TSACs who happens to be on, we call them fitness and wellness coaches, who happens to be on TRD with us, she can run those workshops. I can't ask her legally to stay after or do it on the weekend, right? Or anything like that. So, you know, it's not a perfect system, but at the end of the day, like making sure that they have an opportunity to attend or request a service or whatever, like it's not that challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig it, man. I love people who provide opportunities for people to succeed or get involved, and leave it up to them. But at least you're taking care of your end and taking away as many barriers as possible to get them going.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it sticks, right? Because you can't want it more than them, but you can definitely give them the opportunity to want it. What have you seen with the general trends or things you've noticed with incoming firefighters or the fire service in general? Is it as bad as we think, obesity and ability wise and stuff like that? Or is it just, are we hearing the worst and really it's just a bunch of regular people, just like it's always been, that just need to understand the demands of the job and then train accordingly?
So I think because the fire service struggles with having a fitness standard as a whole, like that makes any recruit class challenging to some degree. You know, I've only been doing this for 3.5 years, so I'm on my 5th recruit class. Actually, it's so funny because my captain and I just had this conversation because, you know, he was a lieutenant like 15 years, 12 years ago or whatever, at the training academy. And I kind of had always just assumed like people don't play sports as much, like blah, blah, blah. But like in this area, like we always had a lot of farms. So you still had people who
My
played a
God.
sport, right? They're farm strong, that
Yeah.
strong, whatever they call them here. Um, I
Call them
I
terrifying.
had
They call them terrifying
assumed,
and wrestlers.
yeah, like I had assumed it was, yes, we are in less physically good shape as a society. We don't move as much of a society. We spend more time sitting, which I do think is true. But I don't know that like those other things, like I think the same people who have always been attracted to firefighting are still attracted to firefighting. And we are a less physically active culture as a whole. So I'm sure that plays into it, right? But I can also tell you my first year here, PT was a portion of their overall score in the class, and I think it was something like 5%. And that was like, if you're getting perfect PT tests and your participation is great, that's a 5, right? But like 5 points is probably not going to make or break your grade. And years ago, right, it was if you didn't meet a 10-minute or a 15-minute mile and a half, like you were fired. And that's just not a thing anymore, right? That's not a thing.
Yeah.
At least where around where I'm from, like that's not a thing in recruit schools because we're struggling so much with recruitment and retention in the fire service. So, I don't know that it's any different. I know that we personally have better tools, like we do in bodies, week 1, week 12, and then week 24 right at the end, so they can see their trends. We do a really good job of like being transparent and providing like nutrition education, and we're going to have a dietitian come in halfway through recruit school and then hopefully again at the end. So doing those things. But I can't say, I haven't been doing it long enough to say, but my captain kind of said for me, like, it's the same people, it's just, maybe like, you always have someone who comes in phenomenal shape and someone who comes in who's not. And, what is my job as like the PT coordinator in that situation? It's getting people prepared to go to fire school, right? That's what I spend 12 weeks doing. And we can do that so much, right, for performance, but like the health is really on the responsibility of that individual.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's especially easy to see that those trends aren't necessarily that different when you just look at the guys with 15 to 20 to 25 years on. It's not like they're walking around like American gladiators either. And so it's very unlikely that they were that 15 years ago and they've transformed into what, the regular looking person they are now. But we get to be so incredibly harsh in general. And it's just our job to be kind of judging and snap judgments and immediate responses that it's very easy to say like, oh, these recruits coming in now are just soft, but, yeah. So were you 17 years ago when you came in off the street and, played middle school soccer beyond that and just liked fire engines. So you got a job. Like you were soft too. It's okay. So it's hard to see that contrast when you look back in time,
Yeah.
but yeah, I believe your captain's spot on. It's the same people. It's just in a different time. And they have this, unfortunately they have newer, harder, more dangerous demands because of building construction and materials and all that. So I think maybe that's where we see a lot of differences. Stuff moves faster now and there's a lot more calls and a lot more demand. And if you're not in the building making serious progress in the first 8 to 10 minutes, then you're in trouble in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to work on an older side of town where we can be in there for 20, 30 minutes and just beat the crap out of the house and be fine. It's a lot of older Victorians, a lot of cinder block and masonry buildings. So we get our money's worth out of those fires. But yeah, there's 40% more calls than 10 years ago at this point. We have this generally the same staffing. So there's a lot more to do. And if you're a little bit sluggish, then it's just that much more easy to see, I think. So that's where we pick on guys. But you just learn that curve just like you learn any curve, and you're back up to speed, rocking and rolling, hopefully soon enough, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the uncomfortable stuff.
Oh.
You've been doing this for 3.5 years, you said.
Yeah.
Walk into this amazing facility, right? This is yours now, and you're going to have a gym teacher intern underneath you, and you have this captain who's been building this for decades, and he goes, Taylor, this is a big deal. I've been working on this for a long time, and we picked you out of the entire world. We did an American Idol of strength coaches, and you came out on top. Congratulations. Now you got to perform until you get comfortable. It'd be some very awkward stuff, some very uncomfortable moments. And then on the heels of that, we kind of talked about the overall feeling of being an imposter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't belong here. Maybe I belong here, but they can see I don't. Our jobs are different. I don't know what your side of it is. Take me through, your first 6 months, your first year of like, how did that go, man? Walking in.
Woof.
Yeah.
So I got hired in 2020. Ooh.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect time. So ideally, right, what you want to do when you get somewhere is like immerse yourself in like what the culture's like, get to know the people. It was fun because I couldn't do that. I wasn't allowed in stations. I could have conversations with people, but like just cold calling stations and talking to officers, right? That's not going to help me do anything. So I did my best to try to be like, hey, look, I don't know the fire service. I'm not going to come in and pretend like I do. So, how about we spend some time like getting to know what the program looks like, what recruit school looks like, and let me just kind of oversee what's being done and like maybe offer suggestions. And that seemed to go over well kind of initially. Some of the like pieces that kind of made me feel like an imposter down the line of that is I think I handled it well initially, but because I didn't understand all the ins and outs in the fire service, like I heard some people, I got put in uncomfortable positions. My name got thrown around, and I kind of felt like it wasn't Taylor Goodman who was at fault. It was anyone in my position was always going to have some of that like backlash because, fun fact, the year before I got hired, the last recruit class had gotten exos to that was supposed to do PT, and it was just a train wreck. Like they didn't show up. They because they only had like 2 people out of the main facility, I guess, and they were sending one person whose full-time job, like they couldn't fulfill the contract, and it was a disaster. So imagine like now another outside person comes in right after that. It just doesn't set up the organization for success. So I attribute it to some of that, and probably 50% me. Coupled with like the tradition of the fire service, like things just weren't smooth. I actually considered quitting because things had gotten really negative. And like, I was like, I don't know how to handle it because again, I didn't know that many people in the department. I felt kind of like handcuffed by like where I was, and it's still COVID. So I'm basically coming in for recruit school and that's it. Right. So like, my identity at the time was so tied to this like one thing that I felt like I was like miserably failing at. Coming out of that, like finishing that recruit class, having more ownership over the program towards the end and learning so much, to now is like, man, I did not know what I was doing then. And like, can so clearly see so many things that I could have done better. Right. I'm a big, like, we have to take accountability or we'll never learn, right? And I think that the programming I'm doing now, and my captain even said, he's like, I think this is the best programming you've done since you've been here. And I was like, nice. Yeah, like I've learned so much. And so just like coming out of that, it took me a while to get to a point where I felt like I do understand the fire service. I think like 16 months after I started, they started letting me in stations to like do ride-alongs and talk to people and like, it sucked in a lot of ways, and I will not be one to like blame COVID for like that lack of like, it was definitely challenging. Like, but probably so a little more than half of the amount of time I've been there, I've like feel like I have a much better handle on what the fire service looks like. And for us, it's not just fire, it's EMS. And I don't want to, shy away from that because that's like, 80% of our call volume is EMS calls. Yeah. And so that does matter too, but just have a much better grasp, learn some hard lessons, had to apologize a few times for my lack of, which is also totally fine. And like, we have to be able to say we're sorry and we were wrong. But I think TSAC last year was like the first time, like that was my second year going. So last August, so that was 2022, where I was like, I know what I'm doing. Like,
Okay.
I know what I'm doing. I have a
Yeah.
handle on this. Like, I think I understand how our system operates, and everyone's operate differently.
Yeah.
But I also like just like I just got a handle for how things needed to be.
So looking back now, like in the moment, while you're going through that tough recruit class in your first run of it, what grade were you giving yourself along the way? Like an F, a D?
Um,
Like was it just junk and you just couldn't pull it together, or what would you give yourself in the moment? Because the next question is, looking back now, was that a realistic grade, or was it really not that bad? It just felt really bad.
it was really bad.
Okay.
Yeah. And it wasn't like I said, like I'll take 50%, 60%. I know it wasn't all me. Um, I because I pride myself on being so good with people, and that's the very thing I felt like I was failing at. Like
Yeah.
we were probably like D, like barely
Okay.
keeping it together, not getting that degree,
Yeah.
like we were just not there. And now I'm
Yeah.
probably more like a B plus. Like I think that we can always be better. I would hope that I never say that I'm like an A plus, because like I think that that's like there's plenty of ego in the fire service. I don't need to have it.
What's your relationship with the people that were in that class now? Are they like, is it a closer bond because they're like, oh man, I knew Taylor when she was struggling, and you're like, oh, those were some tough times and we're good now? Or were some divisions made there where you're still recovering some relationships from that first class?
I think that we all worked to repair that damage. And I think something big that came out of it for me is like having a respect for how things were being done and why they were being done that I couldn't have possibly had coming in, because
Mm.
I didn't really know. Like I naively came from the military thinking it would be a lot similar, like it would be a lot more similar to the fire service, like, and they're not, you know, besides being tactical, like they're not the same, not even close.
Yeah. Right.
And, that was a hard lesson I had to learn. But I would say, like, I don't think that there's any like residual stuff. I mean, I know some people hold grudges, and I'm sure there are some people that, don't like me because of, whatever was said then, which is fine and fair. But the people directly involved, I think that all of the like, we had a little, like, we might as well have had a little mediation where we all sat down like a few classes ago, and kind of just was like, yeah, I was like, basically like, I'm sorry for like how things went down. Like, basically like I messed up. And so, I think that has repaired, and that's, the piece of it is like have relationships, like work through those things. 'Cause it does you no good if that just like festers forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
But I think also what has happened is like confidence has built in me and my ability to do my job because of how I've handled things, because of how our performance is with each class. So, I'm pleased. Like, this is kind of the like imposter piece is like, yeah, my job is to like improve recruits, but if like we have crappy relationships along the way, like, am I really
Yeah.
doing my job right to the best of my ability? So, yeah.
So maybe you can speak a little bit then to how important it is, or not important. You can burn them down if you want, to have a guy like your captain there to. I would assume he was just constantly reassuring and trying to convince you that you were in fact good enough and you should in fact be here. Like there's nobody else that can do it like you, and that's why we picked you. And that's just keep working at it, kind of thing. Because without somebody like that,
Yeah.
you're just alone, thinking you're not good enough, and that can really spiral quick, right?
My captain is a super, like, the best supervisor I've worked under ever, probably. He is a really good mentor, not only of the fire service, but like of the fitness industry, because he's also been really immersed in that for a long time. Probably about as long as I have, maybe longer in a lot of ways, just because, he's older than me. Like, that's part of it.
Had to throw that in there,
But
yeah.
also, like, he's been going to conferences and like on committees and stuff for like, a long time. And he's been in the fire service since he was probably volunteering at 16, right? So,
Yeah.
a different world. But I think he is incredibly fair and hard on me. And like, like, hey, he always like starts with like, positive, right? The sandwich, positive,
Yeah.
improvements,
Yep.
positive. But he's really good about it, and he was good about it then. And he was dealing with some frustrations then as well, because he's trying to get this program started, and he's getting kicked back as like a captain from other, members of the service, the fire service.
Yeah.
And you know I think one of the things that makes him so good at what he does is like, if you tell him no, instead of just being like, okay, well, gonna give up on that, he's like, I'll find another way. I'll use a
Yeah.
relationship. I'll find another way, right? And he has really taught me the importance of that, the importance of having relationships, yes, with, your counterparts, with people you work with, but with chiefs, with people who really like also have a grasp on what's going on at the ground level. And it's
Yeah.
something I don't think he'll ever lose sight of, no matter how long he's been in the office or whatever it may be. So like, without him, and I literally would say like, ooh, if you leave, I leave. I wouldn't stay here with early on. Now I think that I
Yeah.
would be fine, but if you leave, I leave, because he was such a staple for me, probably that first like year and a half, till I really like got my feet wet and started understanding
Yeah.
things. And he gives me a lot of autonomy as well to do things and just like kind of fill him in as we go.
Yeah. Have you seen other people that have had ideas but not have the communication skills that he has, and that just flounders and flops? And
Oh,
because
absolutely.
that gap between line personnel to middle management, basically to senior management or administration, there's some weird disconnect there where people forget how to be a human and talk up the chain, and then it becomes like a victim thing, or like a weird thing,
Yeah.
or immediately, um, like conflict is there immediately. I can't think of the right word, but they can't approach it as like, hey, I'd like to do this thing. It's got to be like, why are you going to be in the way of this thing now that I want to do, or how are you going to screw me on this?
Yeah.
Um,
I think, the thing that makes him different is like, he has like passion and drive. And I think a lot of people will have ideas because they're like, oh, this will benefit the department, but they don't really love it. Like, they don't, their heart's not in it. And that is what makes him different. So, yeah, I have seen a number of people be like, yeah, this is a good idea for the department. But in the same way, like, not any captain could just come in and replace my captain, right? Like, he's been doing it for 12 years. Like, he's not going to leave until he knows someone who cares almost as much as he does. Because
yeah,
until he knows, like, this is going to be like, your heart is in this and you care and you give a shit, like, that's what makes him different and what makes him successful in comparison to some other ideas. And it's not that they're bad ideas, but like, in the same way, like, if you didn't love talking to people and sharing information, like, you wouldn't do these podcasts, you wouldn't waste your time, right? Like, you're not going to put your heart in something you don't really love to do, which is why I struggle so much with like social media stuff, because like, it's fun for
mm.
a minute, a nice little hit of dopamine, right? um,
Sometimes,
yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's just crushing.
But like, I also just like hate literally having my phone in my hand. I'm just like, I'm a POS, and like, I just want to put it down and like go do anything else. And like, I'm not hating on people who do social media, because like, I even reviewed like, strategies on like how to do this only 15 minutes a day, right?
Mhm.
And like, there are ways to do it minimally and not become obsessed with it. Maybe it's just on me, like, because I think that I would, and I just like really like connecting with the world in general, touching the earth, talking to people. Like, that's life,
Yeah.
right? Our phones aren't our life. So um, you have to love what you do to be able to do it well.
Well, that about sums it up. I mean, is there any last pieces of advice or um, gifts you want to leave anybody kind of as parting words here? I mean, I'm sure you'll be back. I'm sure as we continue talking, something will poke you in the side again. Some kind of thorn will hit you, and we'll do Taylor's Tangents on here from time to time. But um, besides just loving what you do and giving a shit about it, is there anything else you want to leave people with?
Yeah. I think that the beautiful thing about the fire service and the military and law enforcement, right, is they're these little gems of society, and they're brother and sisterhoods, and they're family in a lot of ways. And I think to be a coach who comes in, you have to give a shit. Like, I have been in the collegiate space and watched a lot of people who are just there for the ego or, the whatever, right? Like, they're just showing up to tell people what to do. They didn't care about educating their athletes. Like, you cannot be a collegiate coach the same way there as you can as the coach you need to be in one of these fields. Like, you have to take the time to educate, because the health in the fire service, in law enforcement, in military is far more important than the performance is ever going to be. And, we know that from the standpoint of, suicides and cardiac line of duty deaths. And it's like, if we are not prioritizing their health and giving a shit about them, what the F are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you have no place here, and go back to your professional and collegiate settings. So that's something that I've seen a lot. I have talked to most of the coaches that I talk to at Tactical or just within the realm of this do seem to care. Not all of them. I have certainly ran across the few, but you have to give a shit to be in this field. And if you don't, like, hopefully someone is on you about it and being like, hey, like, if you don't have like compassion and empathy for this, like, this probably isn't the place for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's perfect. And I only hope those people are with for real departments, and they'll figure it out within the first few months when they get the 40-year-old guy who ran all night telling him to eat it because he's not doing a Metcon that day, and he has to figure that out. That's the easiest feedback I've ever found, is an adult telling an adult what to do, an adult who has no vested interest in being with you and no obligation to be there.
Yeah.
Telling them to do something ridiculous or offhand. They're like, I don't think I'm going to. And you're like, oh, I have no power in this situation. I have no leverage over this person. I have no ability to make them do it. So I better find out some other way to appeal to them, because I'm just offering suggestions at that point until they buy in. A very difficult position to be in, but there's no way those people who don't care don't find themselves in that position. If they do, I wish I had a little bit of their ego and ability to disconnect from reality, because it's very obvious when you're in that spot.
Absolutely.
Why don't you, even though you hate social media and you want to throw your phone in the ocean, why don't you tell people where they can get a hold of you or find you, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah. So my social media is tgoodie, GOODIE fitness. It's kind of just a place where I like post about like my hiking adventures, some of the yoga mobility workouts that I do, and a little bit of personal stuff. So nothing too crazy. You're not going to get tons and tons from me every week, but if you reach out to me on there, like, it's open. I don't have a billion followers, so if you message me, I will certainly get back to you. I love talking to people and connecting, and for whatever reason, just simply like you asking that question to Vanessa and then me tagging you, I got like 10 followers yesterday, and I was like, dang, this is how it's going to be.
That's Vanessa. It's not me. It was very much obviously Vanessa.
It's probably a combination, but
no.
But yeah, so you can get me on there. And I'm pretty good about messaging back. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.